Art Trek video series, analyzing paintings for their design and composition, Volume 2. Hello again, this is Charles Bernard, the science fiction and fantasy paperback book cover illustrator. Here in Volume 2, I will continue to analyze one of the paintings that I started analyzing in Volume 1 in terms of its design and composition. In this Art Trek video series, I'm focusing on giving you practical knowledge on design and composition that you can apply to your paintings and improve them beyond what you may imagine that they can be improved upon. If you're interested in improving your paintings, you need to have a clear and comprehensive understanding of design and composition. And this Art Trek video series will attempt to give you that clear and comprehensive understanding. For without great design and great composition, there is no great art. This is a painting that I did for a paperback book cover for a publisher, and I really enjoyed reading this story before I came up with some ideas on how I wanted to paint the cover. It was written by Lawrence Watt Evans. He's quite a famous science fiction fantasy author, and I highly recommend this book. If you get a chance, pick it up. I think you'll enjoy reading it. I'm going to remove the title on this cover so that you can see more of the painting. I'm going to start off with the elements of design, and the first element I will talk about is line. There are different kinds of lines. There are actual lines, like this here. They look like lines. They're thin, they're long, so they are referred to as actual lines. But then there are other kinds of lines. There are implied lines and psychological type lines in a composition. An implied line is a compositional line that leads the eye of the viewer around the painting. An implied line can be set up by repeated shapes, for example. These repeated spots lead the eye in a direction. They set up not an actual line because you can't see a line, but an implied line. So when you have repeated shapes that are similar looking, the eye will follow those shapes, and an implied line is created. Then a psychological type line, for example, is the direction in which a figure's eye is looking. Like this figure here in my painting. He is looking up. Let me change the color here to white. He is looking up. This is a psychological sight line, a compositional line. Also, the eye will follow the direction in which a shape is pointing. If the shape has a tapered end, let's say I'm painting this alien here, alien head. Very quickly. Don't go over the strokes too many times. It'll weaken the stroke. Very roughly here, his eye over here, and a nostril, and a mouth. So he sets up a psychological sight line. But the shape itself is somewhat like an arrow. It's tapering, and therefore the eye will be led in the direction in which this pointed shape is pointing. Well, so whenever you have a tapered shape that looks somewhat like an arrow in your painting, the eye is going to follow the direction in which that pointed shape is pointing. The eye will follow a progression of shapes from large to small, setting up an implied directional line or compositional line. And in my painting, there's an implied directional line created by the dragon. The eye follows the neck of the dragon to the dragon's head and to the dragon's flame. This is a long, narrow shape that is pointing in a certain direction. So the eye follows that shape, and the result is an implied directional line. The viewer's eye will also follow the direction in which a figure is moving or leaning, so that sets up an implied directional line. Also, the contour of shapes, the edge of a shape, is a line that the eye will follow. And in my painting, the edge of the dragon's wing leads down to the man, which is the center of interest in the painting. The eye follows it down to the man. Also, these little figures here, they're all looking up, establishing a psychological sight line. See this little guy looking up, and there's a guy here that's looking up, and here. Let me enlarge this again. There's another implied directional line created by the arms of these little figures. The arms are pointing up. An implied directional line. Now this implied directional line of the dragon's neck and head and flame actually continues down like this, and then around and up and back to the man. So an oval shape is created here through this directional line or implied line. As I mentioned before, repeated shapes set up a implied directional line or compositional line, as it can also be referred to. Here in these little figures, this kind of repetition of shapes is setting up an implied line, just like with these shapes here. Let me blow this up. So each one of these figures repeated forms an implied line. So because of this implied line that is set up by way of the repetition of these shapes of the figures, the eye moves along that implied line. From left to right, from right to left. It starts here by the largest shape, and then it moves off to either the right or the left. And it can move across all of the shapes like that. Let me enlarge this once again. This dragon's tail here is more like an actual line, and it leads the eye into the bottom portion of the painting. Now, getting back to actual lines, as opposed to implied lines, there are only two types of line: curve and straight lines. A curve opposite a straight line is the basis of design. And either the curve or the straight line should predominate in a painting. Don't have them equal. Don't have the same amount of straight lines that you have with the curves. Otherwise, your painting will lack unity and harmony. In my painting, most of the lines are curved. Let me change that to white so you can see it better. There's a curve here, 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 here. They're all over. The arm is curving. The heads, the bodies here of these little figures are curving. There's a curve here in the sun. There's a curve in the mirror. There's a slight curve here. Some lines curve more than others. Now you need to balance all those curves with a few straight lines. Not too many. You don't have to have a lot of straight lines to balance a lot of curves. Just a few straight ones, like at the horizon line here, there are a couple of straight lines, and then there are straight lines in this castle here. I'll enlarge this again so that you can more clearly see the straight lines that I'm talking about. You see, in the castle here. It's the lines formed by the edges of the shapes. And here you see the straight horizon line. And there's another one, straight horizon line. Now, there are more straight lines in the painting. I just wanted to point out a few of them. But the majority of the lines are curved. Okay, let me just go over some of these lines again. You have the actual lines in a painting. It's like this tail here is an actual line because it's thin and long. Then you have implied lines, which can be created by a pattern, like this pattern of spots or shapes that are repeated. The eye will follow shapes that look similar or the same. Then the eye will follow the direction in which a figure is looking, like with this alien head, he's looking to the left. The eye will follow arrow-like shapes, shapes that point, like his head does, pointing to the left, so an implied line set up by this shape. Also, the eye will follow progressions from large to small, dark to light, intense colors to gray colors, that sort of thing. The eye starts with the large shape, and then it moves down to the smaller one. So an implied line is set up through this gradation. Also, the eye will follow the longest dimension of a shape. Let's say I'm just quickly sketching this mountain here. And on top of this mountain, I could maybe put a castle. Very rough, just to get my idea across to you. Okay, now the eye will follow this direction here. Whoops, let me get a lighter, brighter color here. This is the longest dimension of this shape. Its length is the longest dimension, height. So that's what the eye will follow, rather than the width, which isn't as long as the height is of this shape. So the eye follows the longest dimension of the shape. Also, the line formed by the edge of shapes is a compositional line that leads the eye in your painting. It can direct the eye of the viewer where you want it to go. And this line is formed by way of the contrast of the shape with its background. In this case, the foreground shape of the mountain is dark and the background is light. So some of these lines can be seen in my painting. The actual lines, right here where the dragon's tail is, the implied line created by the repetition of shapes in the little figures here, an implied line established by the direction in which a figure is looking. The man is looking toward the mirror, and he is moving toward the left. So this line here, established by this figure looking to the left, and he's facing to the left, thus forming an implied line which my figure forms. Then the line created by the contour of a shape that moves the eye can be seen here. And there are other contours also that move the eye. This here, which is not seen as much as this contour here. This is another one of my science fiction paintings. And I want to show you how compositional line is used in this painting. Here you can see the man is looking to the right. Therefore, it's this implied line that's established. He's moving to the left, but looking to the right. And this opposing movement also helps to create interest. Then the contour on his cape leads to his head. So it's this line here that I talked about earlier, the contour line. This figure sets up a strong movement to the left. It would lead the eye out of the picture area if it weren't stopped. And when you have a strong movement like that toward the border of the picture, it needs to be stopped so that the eye of the viewer will remain within the picture. And the way I stop it is by placing this shape here in its path. And also by painting this spaceship in the distance with the trail behind it. So the eye, when led to the left, is brought back into the painting by the spaceship. When you have a strong movement to the left, you can keep the eye of the viewer in the painting by countering that movement with a movement to the right. In this case, the figure looking to the right counters the movement to the left, and therefore the eye stays within the painting and doesn't move out of the painting. As I've indicated, implied lines can point a viewer's attention in a certain direction. These implied lines can be called directional pointers because they point in a certain direction. Let's say mountain here is a large shape, and it's triangular in shape. It's moving the eye. It's pointing this way because, as I mentioned before, arrow-like shapes will lead the eye in the direction that they're pointing. Also, something that I didn't mention yet, if you create a gradation, a tonal gradation, where it moves from dark to light like this, the eye moves along this tonal gradation into the painting. This is a great way to lead the eye into your painting. The same thing could be done in the sky area, where a gradation of value or tone moves from dark to light, and the eye is led down into the painting through this gradation. And then, let's say I can paint this spacecraft here. So the mountain is pointing to the spacecraft. The tonal gradation is leading into the painting to the spacecraft, and so is this tonal gradation in the sky. It's leading down to the spacecraft. Now, the contour of this mountain, which forms a line, also leads the eye to the spaceship. Aside from the mass of the mountain, the eye following the longest dimension, as I mentioned before, of a shape. Now I could add a shadow here, and by doing that, the eye of the viewer could enter here at the shadow and move over to the spaceship. Then I could also put some birds in here, let's say, that lead the eye down to the spaceship. Put it like that, maybe. It's too many. This one should be placed something like that. The intervals of space are too equal. So this forms an implied line that leads down to the spaceship. The spaceship is placed a little too close to the right border. There's always a danger that if you place an important shape close to a border, that the eye will then be led out of the painting. So don't get too close to it. I would have been better if I had moved it over to the left a little bit more. But this is just a rough sketch. Now, a painting must also have what is called a master path. That is a main path of movement. The subordinate movements around this master path are leading to the master path, and the master path leads to the center of interest, the most important part of your painting. That master path can be seen in my painting here. The eye is attracted to these bright accents of color. The eye moves into the painting here. Then it is attracted to what's going on over here. The pyramid, the tapered shape, points up to the bright accents of yellow color, then back to where the volcano is erupting, and the smoke, an implied directional line, moves the eye up. Now the eye is attracted over to the left, where this bright yellow color is, and over to the center of interest, which is the man. So you have a movement that's something like this. And this is the master path, the main path of movement for the viewer's eye through your painting. And every painting must have this master path, this main directional movement that leads to the center of interest. In order to stop the eye from being led out of the picture area, you need to place what are called stoppers. Like I mentioned before, this shape here, this spaceship in the distance, acts as a stopper. It prevents the eye from moving out of the picture because of this implied directional line. This acts as a stopper. And in this rough sketch here, the spaceship acts as a stopper for the mountain that is leading over to the spaceship. So the eye travels along this shape and then it stops here by the spaceship. Stopper. In this little rough sketch here, let's say I have this line, this curved, linear, or reverse curved line, that could be called. The eye is being led down and out. But if I place something here, then the eye is stopped from moving out of the picture area. So this is a stopper. This is what you need to place in the path of a line that would otherwise lead the eye of the viewer out of the picture area. There are other ways to stop the eye from leaving the picture area besides placing a stopper in the path of a line that would otherwise lead the viewer's eye out of the picture area. And this is another way. I'll do a quick rough sketch here. All right, now, something like this, let's say. The eye of the viewer will be led out of the picture area because of the implied direction that this shape is setting up. You can stop the eye from leaving by countering the movement by placing another spaceship, let's say a smaller one in the distance, that's moving to the right, countering the movement to the left. So, by way of a counter movement, the eye can be kept in the picture area, kept from leaving it, without placing a shape over here to stop the eye. It's a little too close to this border. Something like that. Now, I'd like to say a few words about borders. A border, like this left border, acts as a kind of magnet that pulls the shape toward it and the eye of the viewer out of the picture area. The closer a shape is placed to a border, like this shape, placed so close to this border, the greater the pull that that border is going to have on the shape, and the greater the chances of the viewer's eye moving out of the picture area. The further away a shape is from the border, like this border here is further from this shape than this border is. So this border doesn't have the pull that this border has. This is also a way of giving the illusion of movement, of increasing the illusion of movement by placing a shape closer to one border than another. The shape is pulled toward that border, and a feeling of movement is established. And I just want to add a little more flame, going all the way over to the picture border, touching it, and that will help to attract the eye here and move it back into the picture to the right. Now, another way to stop the eye from moving out of the picture area is by moving this shape closer to the right border and putting more space between the border and the shape. So there's more space here between the border and the shape than there is here. And since this movement is to the left, you need to put more space between the border and the shape to keep it from moving out of the picture area. This space will help to prevent the eye from moving out of the picture area. And also because now this border is pulling on this shape in this direction, while the shape is moving in the opposite direction. So that helps to keep the eye from moving out of the picture area to the left. It's important that you remember what I've shown you here and to apply it to your composition. Otherwise, you will not be able to control the eye of the viewer. You need to be able to control that eye and direct it where you want it to go. And you can do that through what I have shown you in this video. The design element of line can be referred to as compositional line when working out your composition. In this painting, there is a strong movement to the left by way of this spaceship. And there is a strong opposing movement coming from the top left down to the right. There are two strong opposing diagonal movements, and this sets up a very dynamic composition. The eye is kept from leaving the picture area at the left because of this stopper. This diagonal opposing movement right here in front of the spaceship acts as a stopper to prevent the eye from leaving at the left. The light beam is also a powerful movement to the left and needs to be stopped by this opposing movement of the meteors. In composition, there is abstract movement, not actual movement. The abstract movement or compositional movement is the result of implied directional lines found throughout the composition. And the movement of this spaceship makes a strong implied directional movement toward the left. But it's slowed down because the shape is anchored to the right picture border. Remember, I talked about the power of borders earlier. A picture border has a pull on the shape or form. So this border on the right is actually pulling the spaceship back, and that helps the spaceship from being pulled in this direction and out of the picture area. Also, if you place more space between the border and the shape, that also helps to stop the eye from leaving the picture area. Now, this powerful movement here, from the top left down to the bottom right, has supporting movements or smaller movements, which are seen here in the smaller meteors, and these very small meteors here. By having those supporting movements, you strengthen this main movement even more. That's why it's so important to have supporting movements to the main movement. They add strength to the main movement. Now, another way that the eye is kept within the picture area, kept from leaving the picture or painting, is by this arrow-like shape here. If you remember, I talked about arrows and they point in a certain direction, and the eye will go in the direction in which they are pointing. So this arrow-like shape is pointing into the painting and helps the eye to stay within the painting and not be led out of it. Now there's a directional movement here downwards. The eye would leave the picture area at the bottom if it were not for these opposing directional movements right here. They stop the eye from moving out at the bottom. The compositional movements that you set up within the composition need to be balanced. So if you have a movement going down like this, you need to have one opposing movement going up or going across the movement like this to balance it. If you have a movement to the right, you need to have one going in the opposite direction to the left. This balance establishes stability. Now here's a little sketch that I did, and I'm going to show you what the movement is here. The eye enters at the bottom of the picture area, then moves up these rocks and over to this little figure that's standing there. Now this movement is balanced by a counter movement over here. So you have movement, counter movement, which establish stability within the composition. Now I decided to darken these rocks in order to create a greater sense of depth in this little sketch. These rocks are lighter in value than these are, and what's in the distance here is even lighter than this or this, of course. And then you have the lightest value in the sky right there. So the eye moves from the darkest to the darker to the lighter to the lightest, and back again. There's also a gradation in the sky that moves the eye down, and the gradation, the tonal gradation in the rocks getting lighter and lighter as they move toward the figure. Whenever you have a gradation, tonal gradation or color gradation, from yellow to yellow-green to green, for example, the eye will follow that gradation. From dark to light, and back again to from light to dark. So compositional movement is also set up by way of these gradations that exist in this little rough sketch.